This is a tutorial on how to build a rocket stove. By now, hopefully you have already printed out your rocket stove plans. I haven't printed out mine because I have the original and here they are. But you'll need to print those out and have them handy so you've got a reference. After you've watched this video, you can take those plans and go and do exactly what I'm about to do now. The star of the show is this bit of 75 by 75 mil 2 mil wall thickness. You could go to 3 mil if you wanted, but this is what I have lying around. It's an offcut, and if you are pretty thrifty, I'm sure you'll be able to find an offcut like this at a building site or somewhere, and if you just ask for it, they'll give it to you. You know, this really isn't any use to anyone except for people like us that want to build rocket stoves. So first things first, I'm just going to check the ends for square, because this would have been cut for drop saw, and as you can see, we are nowhere near square. So let's give ourselves a fighting chance of getting this right, and we'll square up our ends first. Now let's trim this off. It really is if you're new to power tools, do yourself a favour, and whenever you're doing any cutting, clamp the workpiece down onto your bench. It'll just mean that you'll have two hands free to control the grinder. The steadier you are, the straighter your cut's going to be, and the more confident you're going to feel. And confidence is actually a big deal when you're using a grinder. You've got to, if you're terrified of it, and something even seems like it's going to go wrong, you're going to flinch, and it's probably going to, your cutting disc is going to grab, and yeah, it ain't going to be pretty. So, just a quick rundown. For those of you who have never used a grinder before, this could be the first time you've ever picked one of these up. Don't be too afraid of it. Don't hold it with a deft grip. If you do that, you're just more likely to make a mistake. A little trick too when you're grinding, the trick to making your grinder go straight is to not as much focus on where you're cutting currently, but where you're about to cut. So I'm always looking, you know, a centimetre ahead of my cut, and you sort of it's funny, your body just tends to naturally follow through. So if you're sort of staring at exactly where you're cutting, you haven't got any sort of a sense of direction, and I'll find that you will tend to wobble. I just thought I'd give you that tip. There's probably half a mil in that, not even half a mil. I'll take that. that's square enough for our purposes. We don't need that piece anymore. So now that we have mastered the way of the grinder, we're ready for the next challenge. And that is to notch out the top. Now this is why I really love this tool. So I can set that at 12mm. And the drawing calls for a 30mm notch down, leaving 12mm gap all the way around for strength and stability. So I've set my set square at 12mm, and I'm just going to work my way around the top. Right. Now let's set the set square, the set square to 30mm. Excuse me, Mr. Grinder. It's also worth mentioning that when you're grinding, you don't have to apply much pressure at all, much force into the cut. You really just need to let the cutting disc do the work for you, and let the speed that it's cutting dictate how much pressure you put on. You'll get a lot longer life out of your disc if you're not forcing your way into it, and you're not actually going to cut all that much quicker. I find just a little bit more weight than what the grinder physically is a good rule of thumb. So does that make sense? You know, like almost let the weight of the grinder do the cutting, but apply a little bit more force than that. And that's you'll get better cutting disc life, and everything will just run smoother. And that's starting to get a little bit low. Unplug the grinder. Definitely safe. Now, for those of you who know how to change a disc on a grinder, I'm sorry about this, but there'll be those out there who, well, this will be their first time. Now, this button here is your rotation lock. While that's in, this can't spin. It allows you to undo and do up the nut. Another quick tip is you really don't have to go overboard when tightening up these lock nuts. Literally that much, that's all it's needed. The direction of the spin of the blade actually self-tightens these. If you over-tighten it, they can sometimes be nearly impossible to get off. I've had to hammer these off. Put this in a vise and get a chisel, and you don't want to go there, trust me. So don't over tighten them. Hand tight will be just fine. Now this will be a bit tricky, because obviously I want to chop out the middle, but I don't want to go too far back that way because I want to keep this bit and keep it looking somewhat nice. So you just got to take your time and stop a bit short. As you can see, I've gone just about all the way through, but there's just the little bits in the corners that are holding that piece in. We take the trusty claw hammer, and out it comes. Let's do it to the rest. Okay, that'll need to be deburred with a file or something along those lines. We'll do that later though. For now, just be careful, it's sharp and hot. Now, we want our overall body to be 340 millimeters long. At least that's what the plans are telling me. 340. Full of grinding dust. Now we want to hang on to that bit, and I'll show you why later. So let's go. Mark down 220 mil from the very top. We'll go square along. We've marked along, we've just gone down over the edge. Now we'll take our set square at 45 degrees and we want to, there we go. It's important that you don't go that way because, I mean, you're not going to have a very large lower section if you do that. It's going to be tiny. So make sure that you come up this way. Oh, come on, little fella. You can last one more video for me. Now let's flip it over. Now, it's super, super important that this be as accurate as possible because you're going to save yourself a lot of work if you can get this 45-degree cut really like spot on. Schmick, that's a technical term. You want this 45-degree cut to be schmick. Because for one, that'll mean that your rocket stove stands upright, nice and straight, and you'll have less gaps to fill when you weld it together. Alrighty. Now, let's give myself a fighting chance, and I'm going to clamp it down this time. Notice too that I'm cutting along the edge of the line. I'm not sort of cutting, you know, I could cut the line and make it disappear, but I found that if you cut along one edge of your line, whichever's the appropriate size, you'll have a you'll just have a more accurate cut. Now the important thing is to make sure that you stay on the same side of that line all the way around, otherwise you're going to have this is not going to be very good. Not as accurate as it could be. So on that line, that side. Yep. Okay, we've cut our two 45-degree cuts. Let's connect the dots. You might have noticed that I was cutting on an angle. You don't have to, you could just go straight across, but it'll be I need a new disc. Cutting it on a 45-degree angle, or roughly, with the grinder, just means it's going to have a more precise fit at the end of the day. Again, I'm trying to save myself time and hassle when I'm welding. Alrighty. So we now have our upper half and our lower half. And they go together like that. But before we get too ahead of ourselves and go sticking these two bits together, we need to make ourselves a divider point to sit in there. So you have two pathways, one for air to flow through and one to put your wood in. Wood always goes in the top half, by the way. Lovely use for a book. Now we have our offcut. Now for the divider, you can go and, I believe I've written in the plans that you can, you know, get some 75mm flat bar, and that's a really good way of doing it, because as you'll see, when I cut this out, I'm going to make the divider out of this little bit of offcut, and that's fine, but there's a lot of internal pressures going on inside this bit of steel. This started off life as a flat piece of steel. It was then formed into a tube, and it was then formed into a square. And the moral of that story is that there's still a lot of internal pressures going on inside this piece of steel. It's not completely at rest, if that makes sense. So when I cut this, my prediction will be that this lovely flat piece now will curl up like this. We'll have to flatten that out. But you could be lazy and not flatten it out, but it's better if you do. I mean, at the end of the day, this is my flattening out device. It's not a lot of effort. So let's start with our square side, our squarer side. Our divider wants to be 120mm long. If I can get this wretched to work. Okay. 120. It also has a notch in this side here, and that's to increase your airflow. It also increases the burn time of the stove. Gives you more time because as the ash builds up in your combustion chamber, that notch out just allows air to keep going through for just that bit longer. Now, 15mm notch. That's 15. Half of 75. 37.5. That looks better. That's our center. Alrighty. Now, this obviously needs to fit inside our lower. And it's currently, obviously, it's the same size. So I'm just going to cut, I'm just sort of going to guesstimate really. You can see that that has a rolled edge, and there's almost like a mark that runs down the side. I'm going to follow that mark, but on that side of it. You can just sort of see that the edge of that radius goes along nicely. It's a fairly straight line. That's what I'm going to use as a guide to govern the width of the divider. We'll see how it works out anyway. I was talking about those internal pressures. In this case it was pulling inwards. It has started to curve slightly, but that was really wanting to grab on the blade. You just got to be careful. If you're going to use a bit of offcut, just take care at this part. It's kind of why I recommend just buying a bit of flat bar. You just won't have any of these issues at all. And there we have it, one divider. Ooh, it's a bit warm. This will be a bit warm too. But as I was saying, you can see that without me burning myself. See how that's bowed? That's all those internal pressures I was talking about. That piece of steel was quite stressed. Internally stressed, you know. So I'm going to help relieve the stress now by hitting it with a hammer. Before I do that though, I'm going to go cool this down and deburr it. I'll be back. It's just a sign of that you sort of care by deburring this. I mean, I probably wouldn't have to deburr the inside here because, you know, but I'm sure there will be that one person who will try to stick their hand down in there for some reason, and you know, might end up slicing their finger open on a burr, because burrs are razor sharp. It's just a nice little finishing touch. Alright, well, let's make this a little bit less bent, eh? Now, we can actually reuse these little bits that we notched out of the top. Too far. A little trick, if you're really worried about hitting your thumb, whatever you do, don't focus on it. Focus on where you're going to hit, because if you focus on your thumb, I can't hit my thumb, I can't hit my thumb, guess what you're going to hit? Anyway, just saying. There we go. Thank you, little offcuts. The job is done. Well, that is all the components made, except for the handle and feet. I'm just going to deburr these now and get ready to do some welding. Trick for checking for burrs, for heaven's sake, don't check them like that. You will need a band-aid if you do that. You know, if you're checking how sharp a knife is, oh, how sharp is a knife? You know, I'm serious, come on. Just feel it like that, just lightly. If it feels rough, it's sharp. And it means that you just need to give it a few more licks with the file to sort it out. Because look at that, it's now smooth. It's getting close. I might do the rest of that later. Very good. Have our bits deburred. Now it's time to start putting it together. Super critical next step is you need to weld your divider in. Now, the plans call for a 25mm space between the base, 25mm gap there. The easiest way to achieve that is with some 25 by 25mm SHS. Sit that in the bottom, in the middle. Line your front up. And to make sure it sort of stays all nice and square and perpendicular and all that, is I'm going to put a clamp right inside the guts of it. Actually, I'm going to do that this way. That's lifting up a little bit at the front. We'll just push that down when we weld it. That's nice and square. Step back and have a look at it. If you're happy with how it looks by eye, set up the welder. Now, if you're in a situation where you don't know how to weld, I recommend that you learn how to weld. Now we're going to weld this divider into the lower half, and you really want to put a decent little stitch, about 12 to 15mm long, as far as you can comfortably reach in from the front, and again it's the same at the back. Welder's set a little bit hot, that's why I'm stopping and starting. Push that down and get a tack in there. Tack, I'm going to make this easy on myself and spin it around. Well, this is quite a digression. Hold that. There we go. That in. Right, let's have a look at that. It's in. I've just welded it on the four corners. Again, that's really all it needs. They're even probably overkill, those stitches. They really need to be about 10 to 15mm long little welds. Now, I'm just going to show you a little cheater's trick. This is a bit of angle steel. I'm just going to use it to help me get this thing aligned. tap it along the edge of that lead cut. When it's roughly in place, just put the square along it and see how it looks. It's amazing. So I now know that this is a right angle there, and we're square this way. This is just going to really help getting everything to line up nicely. Now we sit that against it. Make sure that our edges are nice and flush on both sides. And that we're hard up against our bit of right angle there. And that is ready to be tacked in place. So let's get set up for that. Check it all, squareness. Everything seems to be still sitting right. When you're sort of tacking something together, it's a good idea to tack opposite corners too. It just helps to keep everything nice and square. Right. This is why when we were cutting the 45 degrees, when I was saying you really want to take a bit of care, because it's really easy to blow that gap out. If you're just a little bit careless or sort of lose concentration while you're cutting, in some cases you could have up to a 3mm gap that then you've got to try to fill with weld, which isn't impossible. It just means a lot of stop-starting welding, and it's just annoying. Before we go any further, let's put a square on that. That's really quite good. We're leaning back that way, wouldn't even be half a mil. Pretty good too. And something that I've learned the hard way is put your rocket stove on a flat surface and walk across the room and have a look at it. What that does is give you perspective. Sometimes you can't see how things are out unless you're unless you sort of walk away from it a bit. So looking down at that, it's actually the RHS, the bit of offcut that I've got, looks like it's actually been squashed a bit and it's a little bit out of square. But it's not too bad and I'm willing to live with it. So, we've established that it's all square, we've got it tacked together, we can now weld it out. let's go the next step and let's clean up these welds. There we have an almost completed rocket stove. That would function right now, but I want to put some feet on it. Now, looking at this little fella, as you can see in the past I've used cattle rail that I've just chopped off in 12mm thick slabs and deburred, and that looks great. Boy, is it time consuming. So let's have a look through the scrap pile. Now, when it comes to the feet, you really can be creative or as boring as you like. I mean, you don't even necessarily have to put feet on it if you didn't want to. The good thing about feet is that if you were going to use it on a park bench or on a table or wherever, it's just going to stop it from damaging the surface that you put it on, you know what I mean? So having that bit of an air gap there is just good insurance. This is some 16mm rod. Hey rod. And I'm going to cut that section out there. A few things you need to think about or consider when you're putting feet on is how stable do you want it, how much room do you want it to take up, and where is the centre of gravity going to be as far as downward pressure, because that's going to be your tip point, if you like. In this case, pots are going to be sitting on here. Its tendency to tip back that way, well, it's, you know, it's going to be that way, but more so left and right. And that's the easy way of telling, just which way offers the least resistance. It's actually backwards tipping is fairly stable, just doing the rocking test. Side to side, I think that's where you're going to get your issues. So I'm going to mark what I think is roughly centre and plonk you on top. And there you have it. Just another quick grinding trick. When cutting any sort of rod or round bar, you really want it well supported. I find if you're cutting it out here and freeballing it, it's very easy for you to tip that down, exaggerator up, and that'll cause this to grab and kick. And a grinder will always kick in the opposite direction of that which the sparks are flying out. So just, it's good to have that in the back of your mind. If you're ever cutting somewhere and you know, which way is this sucker going to kick if it's going to kick? And when I say kick, I mean the blade grab and it throws itself. That's how most, if not all, accidents happen with grinders, is a grinder biting into the material and pulling away. Yeah, that or trying to, do a manicure with it. That could be another way of an accident happening, but majority of the accidents happen from kicking. So if you can do anything to stop that, it's good to have your workpiece well supported, particularly rod. I find that's just notorious for having kicking accidents. Now, to keep things all even, so the back legs are going to be the same width as the front legs. Just, keep things all asymmetrical. OCD, whatever you want to call it. Now all we need is a handle. We might go something a little bit lighter, eh? There we go. Again, ridiculously overkill, but another thing to consider with your handle is you want it. Your handle's going to get hot because it's attached to the source of the heat, right? But you do want enough distance to be able to get your hand in there and grasp it without the heat cooking your fingers. Or if it's in there like that, it's just a bad idea. So you want it, sort of work out roughly where you want it. I think that's pretty good. Let's mark that. And if you're wondering, from the inside to the outside, it's about 45 mil. Now, how big is my hand? Let's cut it off about there. And yes, I am cutting into my bench, but I would rather cut into my bench than cut into my hand. Okay. Let's stick it all together. Go. Good idea to confirm your center. Actually, let's go about there. Again, just 2 little stitches that really will suffice. You don't need to go crazy. Sometimes it's not the quantity of weld that makes something strong, it's the weld placement itself. When you go over welding things, not as much in this case, but in other jobs, put too much weld into something, all you're doing is causing the thing to the bow and distort out of shape because of the amount of heat. So that's it there, stuck on. 4 nice little welds. Let's give this a really quick lick with the sander. Handle's not too hot. This is how you make a rocket stove. A way of making a rocket stove. There's lots of designs out there. There's lots of ways of doing it. I have found this particular design to be really efficient for its size. And for me that's important. I want something that can fit in the back of the car and not take up as much room as a standard barbecue would. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope that you have found this video helpful, and I hope that I wasn't too long-winded. Thank you for watching.